Hello and welcome to the first outdoor edition of Planet Waves TV in quite a long time. In the course of doing the metamorphosis readings, I began to experience some software problems. Apparently, my cinematic adventures were too adventurous for iMovie. Anyway, the result was I have learned how to use a proper video camera, and now I can take my show on the road. Here we are outside the High Falls Food Co-op in Ulster County, New York. I'm on the corner of Lucas Avenue and I think 213. And I want to tell you a little story. Last night I attended a meeting in a place called Marbletown at the Marbletown Multi-Arts Center. It's kind of a community arts center, basically. I'm amazed that the meeting happened there, but what I experienced was about 120 people. That's my count. I counted the people in the opening plenary session. About 120 people having a meeting, figuring out what to do about the restrictions in society that are being blamed on a virus. This group included, well, the leadership of this meeting came from Columbia County. That's a county that is northeast of where I am, across the Hudson, and then up one county. And Columbia County has been leading the way in the, let's say, the I don't want to say struggle. They're not really struggling. They're kind of having a good time. But in the struggle against the mandates, and one of the reasons that Columbia County is so far ahead is that they organized right around the time of the lifting of the religious ban, the lifting of the religious exemption to vaccines, which was in the middle of 2019. And when that happened, they got organized because many of those people had depended upon the religious exemption to be able to not have to inject their themselves and also their children with what they understand to be many different poisons. And the way that you can tell that they're not crazy is just read a book about vaccine injury. I mean, you only have to read one. But anyway, they had a good 8-month lead, and so a lot of leadership has come out of this group that is centered around an email list called Columbia County No Mandates, and around a physical center called ArcLight, built by Dale Hartka for reasons he did not know, and then this became a kind of a center of the anti-mandates movement, and It was incredible to be sitting in a room full of 120 people, none of whom were wearing masks, not a single one of whom that I know of had been injected with this thing that is claimed to be a vaccine, but is not really a vaccine. And I have been hanging out among the uninjected and the unmasked and the unsocially distanced now since November. And I only know of one person who claims to have had something vaguely resembling COVID. And so if anyone believes that unvaccinated people are falling over like flies and that masks save lives, I'd like to know why it is that I don't know of anyone in this entire community of several hundred people who has had the meekest issue with COVID. Now, it also turns out that I don't know a single person, and I know a lot of people. You're going to have to take my word for that, because I spend my life meeting every person I can possibly meet, and I've done this since I was a teenager. I don't know one person who claims to have had COVID and who tested positive. I know people who claim to have had some kind of thing that they said, well, this might have been COVID, but not a single one of all of those people tested positive. And so there are days when I feel like I'm living in a completely different universe than everyone else. But there is some kind of a bifurcation going on. We've been seeing this for a long time. I think it was Karl Rove who dressed down a New York Times reporter and accused him of being in the reality-based community. So if Karl Rove is accusing someone else of being in the reality-based community, we might ask what community Karl Rove is part of, or was part of. In any event, I'm just here to tell you that if you think that unvaccinated people are some kind of a disease vector or causing this, or are irresponsible people, I want to know why everybody's fine in at ArcLight and in the Columbia County No Mandates group and in this group that I was at last night. And I will say spiritually that it was profoundly inspiring to be around people who are not only not there to complain, but who are there to find solutions to the problems that are being caused by this entirely inappropriate set of reactions that have absolutely nothing to do with protecting people's health or in any way preventing the spread of a virus that I can tell you in my experience, and I estimate that my research team has somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 hours into this story. You might think between 5,000 and 10,000 hours, that sounds like a long time. Well, it sure is a long time, and I've got a lot of people working for me, and I'm a very well-experienced investigative editor. I've been covering these kinds of fraud schemes since the early 1980s. People who are not only not complaining, but people who have been finding solutions and who are working together and who are consciously and lovingly addressing the damage that is being done to our society in the name of something that is not even vaguely related to the thing claimed. I know some people, I have a fairly wide, at least diverse readership, and people try to inform me of the other side of the story and tell me that I've got it wrong, and that and someone boldly informed me last night that my view is not the majority view. Like, well, thanks a lot. I have a question. When was my view ever the majority view? Except I do like apples and puppy dogs, so I guess I'm in the majority on kittens, on those things as well. But the people who tell me that I am wrong do not really do any research. They spend their time watching CNN and Fox News and MSNBC and reading mainstream commercial outlets with no knowledge of who actually holds the stock in those outlets. Whoever pays the piper calls the tune. I would like to know what Rachel Maddow is actually paid $30 million a year for, and why I should have to take the word of someone who's paid $30 million a year and who does not have to pay her own assistant. I wouldn't be surprised if her housekeeper is not paid for by NBC Universal. And I'm also here to say that if you are in the minority view that this problem has been completely distorted. It's way beyond overblown, but this problem's been completely distorted, and the claim of a viral outbreak has been abused to the point of locking people into places and counting every healthy person as a sick person. If you think that's fucked up, you are not alone. You're not alone among people who are not getting their information from CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Democracy Now! And I can't believe I said that all in one sentence. But one of the factors of this propaganda campaign, and one of the reasons why you think that there might only be one side to this story, is because when you have Amy Goodman largely agreeing with CNN, largely agreeing with the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, you got to think, well, maybe they all know something that I don't know. And I would say, no, why don't we take a step back and just fact check the things that they're saying, and forget that it seems that all of these big honchos who are all paid multi-million-dollar salaries may simply not be in any way in accord with the actual science. I would also add that if you think that science is what Tony Fauci says, that is a misunderstanding of science and the scientific method. When I was covering a PCB and dioxin cover-up, a lawsuit basically to expose a fraud scheme by General Electric, Monsanto, and Westinghouse Electric Corporation, I was in the backyard of this attorney in Las Vegas, And he said to me, we're going to begin this conversation by explaining that the opinion of a scientist and a finding of science are two completely different things. I'll say that again. The opinion of a scientist and a finding of science are two completely different things. They bear no relationship. Now, theoretically, the opinion of a scientist should be based on scientific findings. A scientific finding is something that begins with observation and a testable hypothesis, where there is a research and investigation method used that is openly documented, where all the data is presented, and where there is a conclusion to the experiment, and then the experiment is repeatable. I will say to you right now that if none of those things exist, most particularly the repeatable experiment that gets the same results, it is not a finding of science. And most of what we have right now are where there are scientific experiments, they are not repeatable. It is my understanding that no experiment conducted with the polymerase chain reaction is repeatable. I can provide you the scientific paper on that by a man named Dr. Stephen Buston in the UK, who deconstructs many different experiments conducted with the polymerase chain reaction, the PCR, and demonstrates that this device is so problematic that they cannot even repeat a single experiment. And if you can't repeat an experiment, you don't have a finding of science. If you claim that's a finding of science, you're completely full of shit. You are lying. You are committing fraud. If you are a scientist, and so any time a scientist makes a claim, anyone claiming to be a scientist makes a claim, your first question as a journalist, my first question is the very basis of my deserving press credentials is a single question: where's your data? Let's see it. I don't just trust someone because they're a scientist, a government official, a corporate public relations person. Now, this is a big deal in a world where people can't stand up to their neighbors, their partner, their children, their spouse, and in a world where many people think they need a gun to be able to get their way or assert their reality over another person. But we do need to ask, anybody claiming to be a scientist or to be asserting a finding of science, the question is, where's your data? Now, one closing point, and I'm going to keep saying this, I'll probably say it 100 more times, so now 99 to go. One of our most serious problems here is that the press is not doing its job. If you go to the government website on the CDC webpage called the Vaccine Adverse Events Database, or VAERS, you will see that the federal government admits that it has, as last time I checked, as of 7,000 reports of death following the COVID injections. 7,000 reports of death following the COVID injections. This is something like 20 or 30 times more deaths in all of the decades that the VAERS database has been in existence, which is only since the mid-1980s. And so I realize there's a lot of problems with the government, but I will also tell you that a lot of the stuff on the CDC website is accurate data. It is accurate and it is very important data, but that data is not being reported by the mainstream press. And so if the government says something, if the government provides a fact, like the number 7,000 people reported dead, that is a primary source. It is a government statement. The press has an obligation to report that number. Not to verify it, not to prove it, but in the first instance to say that today CDC updated its records and admits that it has 7,000 known reports of death following the COVID injections. Now, there are a lot of studies done which indicate that 7,000 number is going to be off by a factor of 10 at minimum. That would mean that at minimum 70,000 Americans, by the way, Americans, they eliminated 7,000 other deaths because they were from abroad. So I guess like Vietnamese people and Salvadorans and the rest, people from overseas don't count. However, 7,000 dead Americans off by a factor of 10, that belongs on page 1 of the New York Times. And I can assure you that if that were on page 1 of the New York Times, people would be activated, they would be furious, they would not be accepting what is going on. And so, in my view, as a member of the working press, the most serious betrayal is coming from people who pretend to be journalists and editors and who pretend to be editing and producing news publications and news programs. And I think that the only way that we are going to get out of this, or one of the most important ways we're going to get out of this, is going to be to hold the press accountable for this behavior. It is now up to all the small places, the little bitty Planet Waves websites, and places like Off Guardian, and numerous independent blogs and podcasts and video podcasts to inform people what is happening. And there are a lot of people who won't believe something unless it is on page 1 of the New York Times. But the New York Times is not the voice of God. The New York Times is run by people who are paid and who have corporate overlords, and whoever and whatever they may be, and whoever and whatever their agenda may be, it is plain to see that they have not reported the fact that there are said to be published 7,000 reports of death following these injections. I'm frankly amazed that this is not a bigger issue, and that people are not more irate over this. And it is disturbing that people do not accept as true anything that is not reported, or a great many people anyway do not accept what is true unless it appears in the New York Times. And that's very dangerous, because if they have their own agenda, if they're somehow playing along with somebody else's game, and maybe that game involves selling a lot of vaccines or some other pernicious agenda, then you are going to be filtered from the truth. And if you believe that it's only true if it's in the New York Times, then much of that problem resides within yourself. And in my second conclusion, I will just add a story that was first annoying, and then I realized how relevant and humorous it was. Friday morning, my phone rang, and it was a reader who had already emailed me, and I think left a message on Facebook. And he was very concerned that I had on Planet Waves FM an interview with a civil engineer named Roland Angle, who is a spokesman for Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, an organization of 3,000 architects and engineers and demolition experts and skyscraper designers and all of that. And I said, they have a lawsuit against the Department of Commerce demanding a reopening of the investigation into World Trade Center 7. I sent you evidence from that lawsuit. I had in fact sent him testimony from Richard Gage, the founder of Architects and Engineers, that I found on the NIST website, the agency beneath the Department of Commerce. And he said, and I said, there is a federal lawsuit going on now to reopen this investigation. And he said, no, there's not. I watch the news every night. If there was a lawsuit, I would have heard about it. Therein lies the problem. And we are the solution. Signing off from outside the High Falls Food Co-op, this is Eric Francis, the editor of Planet Waves and the host of Planet Waves FM. Thanks for listening, and stay in touch.